I am about to show you your next camera, a camera that doesn't really seem to get the recognition it deserves. And this is it, the Pentax PC35 AF. Now I could just sit here and talk at you about this camera and then you would see that I'm 100% right, as usual, and then you would run out to do some grubby deal to get your hands on one. But instead, to really prove my point, let's compare it to another camera that is highly regarded, extremely capable, and an eye-watering 25 times more money, the Yashica T4. If the Pentax can beat this Adonis of a film camera, then it definitely deserves your love. It's David versus Goliath, Pepsi versus Cola, you versus crippling social anxiety. Obviously, image quality is quite important when talking about cameras, and we will get onto that, but there is also so much more that goes into making a camera good. So this thing is pretty cheap. 16 quid this little guy cost me on eBay, and it came with a power winder grip, which was totally mashed and went straight in the bin. Now £16 does seem like a really good deal, and I was sort of lurking in the shadows of eBay waiting for this to come up so that I could pounce. And I have owned this a while, but to make sure this wasn't some fluke deal, I have since done it 2 more times. Both of these cameras were about 12 quid each. Now you might not get as lucky as I did, but I guarantee it will be nowhere near as much as you'd have to cough up for this bastard. But if you really do want to shell out on one of these things, they also did a camouflage version, but they're pretty hard to find. Do you get that? Yeah? Because it's camouflage? Come on, that's worth a subscribe. So, build quality. The Yashica is pretty much your standard small camera build, light, compact, and constructed of the sort of plastic that makes me handle this thing like a baby panda egg out of fear of dropping it. I would not like this camera's chances if it slipped out of my buttery fingers onto the hard pavement below. The Pentax, however, is built like a shit brick house. It feels heavy in your hands, like it would really hurt if and when you threw it at someone. Now, I'm not saying this thing is indestructible, but out of the two, my money's definitely on the Pentax surviving a fall. Some bits of this camera are even made of metal, like the film door, as you can clearly see by what I'm choosing to call patina, and not just shitty factory finish and rusty paint. This issue actually seems to be a running theme with these cameras, but hey, at least Pentax were consistent. It looks the nuts as well, all black with little red hints highlighting the switches that you'll be using, like the tiny switch that opens the front cover. Now the way that the Yashica opens is pretty cool, I guess. Yeah, flick the switch, the cover rolls back, the lens poops out, brilliant. But have you ever feared for your life turning on a camera? Well, now you can. The Pentax has this clamshell design which opens with the force of 1,000 suns. There must be some sort of weapons grade spring in this little bugger because it opens with such vigour that it feels like it's going to smash itself to pieces. And I can't quite explain why, but this is a good thing. So the Yashica, like lots of high-end point and shoots, has fancy motors inside which advance the film for you. And the Pentax has a good old-fashioned basic winder akin to a disposable camera. On the face of it, you might think this makes it worse, but you're wrong yet again. Who doesn't love the instant dopamine shot straight to the brain when advancing any film camera? Do you really want a machine to take that away from you? Next thing you know, you'll be driving an automatic car or getting AI to make your photos for you. On top of this, if I had $1 for every time a point and shoot film winder motor had crapped out on me, I'd have at least $4. Surely having a manual winder like this is just one less thing to go wrong. Also, if you're a crafty little bugger, a manual winder gives you the option of taking a roll of film out while still leaving the film leader exposed. Then you can throw it in another camera or develop it or whatever you want to do with your crappy photos. An automatic winding camera is just going to suck that film leader all the way back in, making it that much trickier for you. By the 1990s, we'd put a man on the moon, we had genetically modified food, and we found a way of storing information on a plastic disc. But for some reason, we didn't have the means, the understanding, or the technology to make cameras smart enough to remember their flash settings. So this Yashica, like many point and shoots, has you cycle through the flash settings every time you turn it on. The Pentax has no such issue. Just a switch on the bottom of the camera that ejects the flash out at the speed of sound. No pushing a tiny button over and over and over and over again. Just flash or no flash. So yeah, you might not get the same smarty pants flash settings that you do on other cameras, but to be honest, what more do you really need? I mean, I have never even once seen you use the red eye reduction mode on your point and shoot. Now, before I give you even more reasons why this camera is so good, I want to give a quick shout out to this week's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes to choose from. You want to get better at photography, illustration, writing, animation, or business? They've got that all covered and a whole bunch more. Personally, I've been wanting to do a little bit more street photography, and I discovered a great class by the photographer Andre Wagner. I was already familiar with his work, so it was nice to see his process behind the scenes. And now, all I want to do is sell everything I own, move to New York City, and roam the streets photographing strangers. On top of this, I'm also watching a class by MKBHD, all about YouTube content creation. It's all very insightful. So if you want to learn or develop some new skills to take your career or passion to the next level, you should definitely check them out. And the first 500 people who use my link in the description will receive 1 month free trial of Skillshare. Right then, back to the Pentax. The Yashica has DX code reading, which means when you put a roll of film in it, it takes the liberty of assuming you want to shoot that film at the correct ISO and takes all choice away from you. I mean, what's it going to do next? Tell me how to dress? Who to vote for? The Pentax, on the other hand, says, hey man, you want to shoot this 400 speed at 200 ISO? You do you. Have at it. Go ahead. And it does this with a little switch on the bottom of the camera. Now, it doesn't have a lot of choice. It goes from 25 to 400 ISO, but that's enough to work with. And I know that's just another thing for my tiny, smooth brain to have to remember, but at least it's nice to have the option. Other features include a backlight button, which adds 1.5 stops to your exposure for when you're shooting into the light. Something you don't really get on a lot of point and shoots. The Pentax is also powered by AAA batteries, which you can get for free at your parents' house out of their TV remote, and much more convenient than the C123 CR-LR44-P2 or whatever bullshit is powering the Yashica. In fact, I'm willing to bet that the battery alone for the Yashica cost at least half of what I paid for this Pentax. It's got a self-timer with a panic-inducing countdown that sounds like a bomb you've got to disarm, and is mega handy if you don't have any friends to take pictures of you. The buzzer for the self-timer also doubles up as a warning if the camera thinks that there isn't enough light in a shot. Some people do modify the camera to get rid of the buzzer, but I quite like it. The Yashica, like lots of cameras, just has some piddly little red LED as a warning, which is fine, but it doesn't quite stop me in my tracks like a camera literally screaming at me. Considering this camera only came out a year after Pentax revealed their first ever autofocus system with the Pentax MEF, it is extremely good. But it's not good because it gets it right every time. It's good because it tells you when it doesn't. In the bottom of the viewfinder, there's a small focusing scale. Half pressing the shutter moves a needle to show you where the camera is planning on focusing. I will admit it's hard to get a precise measurement using this scale, but it's enough to know when the camera's got it completely wrong, and it gives you way more information than the Yashica is giving up. That thing has no problem keeping a secret from you and wait until you've got your photos developed and scanned before revealing that it's completely messed up. If you don't want or you can't find this particular PC35, then you do have some options. The Pentax PC35 AF-M is essentially the same camera except for some DX code reading and just general camera layout, and the fact that the M stands for motor and advances the film automatically, giving your right thumb a rest. I've seen your right thumb though, it could do with the extra workout. There are also later cameras in the PC lineup like the Pentax Pro Quartz, which is actually the camera I owned first and introduced me to this whole lineup. These are completely automatic. Auto flash, auto focus, auto return, auto loading, auto lens protector. That one actually is pretty sick, but ultimately you have no controls other than a shutter button. The images are still decent, even though the lens design seems to be slightly different, but every single one of these I've bought has bricked itself in a matter of days. And after going through a fair few of them, I decided to look at its predecessor. In a lot of ways, it did me a huge favour. So the lens on this is a 35mm with a maximum aperture of 2.8. 2.8, that is wild. That's on par with some proper popular point and shoots like the Mu 2 and the Contax T2. It's even got the Yashica beat with its aperture of 3.5. This is all well and good, but what's it actually like in practice? Well, to find out, I loaded both these cameras up with a roll of Ultramax because I wanted to and not because that's the only film I had, and took them both out for the day to shoot some photos. In all honesty, I had no idea how these two cameras would compare side by side. And at first glance, in a lot of these images, you can see that the Pentax is doing quite a good job of keeping up with the Yashica. I'm a fan of how the Yashica renders photos, but the Pentax is plopping out some nice contrasty images. One thing I did notice straight away is that the PC35 does have the tendency of slightly underexposing the odd shot. This might just be this particular copy, and it's not chronically underexposed, but definitely noticeable side by side with another camera. The other thing I noticed, which I did not expect, is that the Yashica seemed to miss focus more than the Pentax. It didn't miss a lot, it just missed more. On the whole, the quality of these images is pretty damn close, but in some cases, one camera does seem to have a slight edge over the other. Take this photo for instance. The first thing you notice is that this is Bruce Wayne's dining room from the second best Batman movie ever made. But if you look closer on the writing on the wall, the Pentax does seem a tad sharper. In fact, dare I say it, the Pentax actually seems to be just a bit crisper than the Yashica. Now there could be a whole bunch of variable factors to explain this, and obviously this is very much a real world test. If you wanted a proper test where I shoot sharpness charts, then I'm afraid you've come to the wrong place. I want to know how these cameras compare when you're actually using them. But just going on these photos, is this cheap, often overlooked camera sharper than a massively expensive camera with a Cole's Ice T-style lens? I don't know, man. I don't know. It looks pretty good to me though. I don't know. And for sure, it's doing a good enough job to make you question the price difference between these two cameras. So there we go. One of my favourite point and shoots, and maybe your next camera. Video's over. Good work, guys. Great job. Really well done all round. Especially me. You're alright. How do I get out this thing?